Some conservatives say Barbie is feminist garbage. Others say it's actually a critique against feminism. Which is it? My answer might surprise you. I'm Samuel Say, and this is the Slow to Speak podcast. If you're watching the video version of this episode, you can see that I'm clearly wearing pink. I didn't wear pink when I watched the movie this past weekend, but I figure if I'm going to do this review, maybe I should just wear pink just for the fun of it. Besides, I think it's a nice shirt, so it seemed to make sense to me. But okay, this is my review of Barbie. Barbie has made, I think by this point, either I think it's actually made over $800 million already at the box office. This movie is on track to be one of the biggest, actually the biggest movie of the year. I think right now the biggest movie of the year in terms of box office numbers is Mario. This film is probably going to destroy that in a matter of weeks. So this is pretty surprising. Who would have thought that a movie about Barbie would be probably the biggest movie of the year? Usually it's superhero films, it is big blockbuster action films that would be the biggest movie of the year. But Barbie is probably going to end up as the number one movie of the box office for the entire year. Um, and it's probably because of just the numbers and the immense tweets and social media posts about it on social media, the whole pink kind of craze going on. It seems like it will be the movie that defines 2023. So clearly, this is a very big movie. It's creating a lot of conversations, a lot of debates and topics and things like that. So it's important that we talk about it. This is obviously a new podcast where I want to talk about culture and how how conservatives should think about culture. So it seems to make sense to do a review on this. Plus, I won't give my thoughts on the movie, away just yet. But the movie is a very interesting movie on many different fronts. So before I get to that, though, I want to just talk about the movie a little bit in terms of the reviews. The reviews for this movie have been fantastic. It's very well reviewed on Rotten Tomatoes. The movie has an 89% critic rating, which is again extremely good. And then it also has an even more impressive 86% audience rating. So, according to Rotten Tomatoes, 9 out of 10 people like this movie. And meaning that, of course, most people like the film, except conservatives, apparently, or at least conservatives like Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro has infamously, released a 43-minute rant against this movie, and it's pretty funny considering that he's almost 43. I don't know how old he is. I think he's about 40 years old. So he's almost 43, I guess, and he's producing an episode where he's just ranting about Barbie, and I actually find it hilarious. I love Ben Shapiro. I think he's hilarious. I appreciate obviously his views on culture, but I don't mind his rants against Barbie, although I don't completely agree with him. But more on that soon. One of the fascinating things about Barbie, before I get into um, the movie, is that before I get into my review, I should say, is that you know the film is basically about Barbie and Ken trying to find meaning in their life. The plot is basically they are traveling from Barbie land into the real world to understand why they exist, right? So the movie's really about existentialism. That's really what it's about. It's them trying to find the meaning, the point of their own life, or their own lives, I should say, because it's both about Barbie and Ken. And one of the fascinating things about this movie is that there is multiple Barbies and multiple Kens. And from what I understand, that is what Barbies are. There are different kinds of Barbies and different kinds of Kens, and this movie portrays that. Um, but Margaret Robbie's Barbie is just one of the multiple Barbies in the movie, although she is a central character. And then Ryan Gosling's Ken is also one of the multiple Kens in the movie. But one of the fascinating things about the movie is that there is actually what I would say, what I would describe as a Ken who identifies as Barbie in the movie, in the sense that there is a trans actor who is playing Barbie, but obviously it's a man, so he should be a Ken, and they don't really address this in the movie. They don't touch on it, but I just did some research a little bit, and it's not a big surprise that this movie would have a trans actor in there. So the average audience probably doesn't know that that one of the Barbies is actually really a Ken. But I think it's something to keep in mind in terms of how I will talk about this movie going forward. So before I get into, I've already hinted some of my concerns about the movie, but before I get into that, I will mention I think the good things about the film, and there are actually a few great things about the movie. One is, and this is obvious, you can see from the trailers, the set is incredible. It's maybe the best thing about the film. The costumes, cinematography are all great. Everything from a visual perspective is really, really good. It's a really beautiful movie. It is pleasing to the eye. I don't know much about, you know, costuming and cinematography and everything like that. But I love beautiful movies, and the movie's very beautiful. It looks good. From what I understand of Barbie, I was playing with my action figures. Let's go with that. My action figures. I was playing with my DC heroes and things like that. I didn't care for Barbie, obviously. Nevertheless, from what I understand, the movie portrays the Barbie land, I don't know, toys or whatever very well. And there's some choices they make in the movie to separate Barbie Land from the real world. That's really, really well done. So visually, the movie is, very, very beautiful. Also, Margaret Robbie is really good as Barbie. They really couldn't have picked a better Barbie, in my opinion. There have been some silly tweets from people in the manosphere saying that she's not beautiful enough. That's just dumb. I'm not gonna get into, what I think about someone's beauty necessarily, but she looks the part. Let's just say that she looks the part. Um, and look, she's a great actress, right? So for the role that she's given, she does really, really well in it. But Ryan Gosling the is he steals the show. He is really, really good in this movie. He is my favorite part or person in the movie. Um, he's the best character in the film, and it's not even close. He's really good. You can tell from the trailers that he's really good, but I couldn't stop laughing or smiling whenever he was on screen. He is. If the movie was just about Barbie, I mean about Ken, it would it would be. I would have enjoyed the movie even more, or a lot more. Um, and you can just tell from the movie that Ryan Gosling is just having fun. I mean, you've seen also in the trailers and in the interviews, his whole Kenergy kind of personality or demeanor. He's just having a lot of fun in this movie, and because of that, because he's great in the role, because his dialogue is actually pretty good, very funny. You're also having fun whenever he's on screen. At least that was true for me. Um, but now let's talk about the bad things about the film. Well, the first thing is the story is extremely weak. And I use extremely very precisely. It's extremely weak. It's a very simplistic movie, and it's also incoherent. Um, it's rare, I think, for a movie to be both simplistic and incoherent, but this movie very much is that way. But I will describe that more later. The incoherent nature of the movie is part of, I think, why there's a lot of debate about what this movie's about. Some of the dialogue are great, especially Ken's dialogue, but other parts maybe most parts, I think are really, really bad. Um, Honestly, it's so bad that sometimes it feels like they are plagiarizing CW shows. Some of it is just cringy. It's just terrible. Um, there's, in particular, there's a monologue from one character. If you've seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about. There's a monologue from one character that it's supposed to be the crucial, poignant, climatic scene of the entire movie. The entire audience is quiet as this monologue is happening, and my wife and I, we just turned to each other and we bursted out laughing really hard at this monologue. It is terrible. It is horrible writing. It is truly CW level writing. It's just, it's supposed to be emotional, but I'm just laughing at just how bad it is. So, again, the writing, the dialogue is really bad. And part of that is because they used every SJW woke feminist buzzword you can think about in this movie. They had an annoying 13-year old talking about or ranting, whining about capitalism. And it's like, wait a minute. First of all, a 13-year-old wouldn't talk this way. Now I know that these days they're being, indoctrinated, so sometimes they talk like that. But this one, it's just again, I don't want to give too many things away, but when you hear her whining, you just roll your eyes, not just because of what she is saying, because she's an SJW, but also because it's not realistic. Even in this TikTok world, that's just not how the average 13-year-old woke person would even talk or sound like. So, yeah, they whine about capitalism. They mention cultural appropriation. They mention fascism several times. They reference the indigenous genocide. They especially mentioned the patriarchy between 10 to 15 times at least. It is, I mean, I expected that they would address some of these things, right? I already knew the nature of this movie going in, but I was still surprised by just how woke it was. And look, I enjoyed Black Panther, right? The first one. Second one is terrible, but the first one I thought was a really good movie. That movie is woke as well too. The movie is very much from a critical race theory lens. It's very much about post-colonial theory. It's it is a woke film, but because it has better writing, they're a bit more somewhat subtle with that message. And that's what a good movie should be in that way. If the movie is about Barbie or Black Panther and you have a message, whatever it is, even if it's woke, it's better when it's more subtle than just beating you over the head with it. And that's one of the reasons why this movie is so bad from a storytelling point of view. Um, Naturally, it's very preachy, it's very woke, it's very much a feminist movie. The movie suggests um, that being a mother is unappealing, that it's uninteresting, that it's scary and weird. Now, some people are debating this, but I think it's very clear in the movie. From the very beginning of the movie, you can tell the movie has a bias towards mothers, or especially pregnancy. Um, there's also several scenes where they are they are the way they talk about a pregnant Barbie in Barbie Land shows what they seem to think about mothers. Um, and that's very clear. There have been articles written about the anti-mom bias in this movie, and it's very much true. It's very clearly anti-mom in that way. Some disagree with this. Some say it's actually pro mothers, but I will explain later on why I think this is actually inaccurate. The movie suggests that mothers are being a mother is more of a burden than a blessing, right? As conservatives, or especially as Christians, we know that children are a blessing, but Barbie, in several instances, implies that children are burdens more than a blessing. So, with that being said, is Barbie a woke feminist movie? Well, yes. Then that means that it isn't actually a critique against feminism, then, right? Well, actually, it is. it is still a critique against feminism. That might seem like it's a contradiction, and it is, but that's actually my point about this movie. The people who say Barbie is a feminist movie are correct. They're right. And the people who are also saying that it is a critique against feminism are also correct. But there are two reasons for this. As I said, the writing in this film is terrible. I think that's why there's a debate about what the movie is really about. Because if the film was well written, there wouldn't be a debate, right? The film is there's a debate about the film because it's incoherent. Their messaging doesn't make any sense. But I think there's also a bigger reason for this confusion. It's not just because the plot is incoherent. It's not just because the writing is terrible. It's because feminist critiques on the patriarchy are actually critiques on feminism. This is really important. I'll say it again. Feminist critiques on the patriarchy are actually unintentionally critiques on feminism. The reason why some people think Barbie is a critique of feminism is because every feminist critique on society is actually a critique of feminism, not the so-called patriarchy. For example, let's think about the feminist argument, the biggest feminist argument for abortion rights. Feminists say that women need abortion so they won't be single moms or so they won't lose their careers, right? But the problem with that is, well, feminism created the conditions for them to think that way. Feminism created the sexual revolution, which says that sex outside of marriage, great, women should pursue that. It is liberation, it is freedom. But it's not the patriarchy that we're saying that is, again, the so-called patriarchy that is saying that. It is feminism that says that, right? They're the ones that promote that young women, teenagers, women who are unmarried, should pursue sexual freedom, not the patriarchy, which obviously creates a problem when a woman gets pregnant. Then she feels as if she has no other alternative than to have an abortion. But the patriarchy didn't create that problem, feminism did. So it's a feminist problem, right, which is promoting sexual revolution, and then a feminist answer, which of course um, is abortion. Feminism also says that women should prioritize their careers over marriage and children, not the patriarchy, right? Feminism says that a woman's career is more important than marriage or children, which is, again, one of the reasons why they say women should have the right to abortion. They'll blame it on the patriarchy, but again, it's feminism that is saying that your career is more important than having children, therefore, you need the right to have an abortion. So all of these things, all the reasons they give for why abortion is necessary is because of the problems that feminism have created or has created. So in a similar way, right, the reason why women think they need abortion in order to thrive is because of feminism, not the patriarchy. So Barbie is a feminist film that unintentionally criticizes feminism. It's this is very clear. Now, they're not the story is horrible, right? The story is unclear. But if you are understanding feminism and you're understanding what the movie is trying to do, then you see things clearly, though they don't. Right? So to prove to you that that the movie is trying to promote feminism and not necessarily to critique feminism, I'll just read a very quick, short quote from the director. Her name is Greta Gerwig. She's a well noted feminist in Hollywood. She says Barbie is most definitely a feminist film. All the cast members, including Margaret Robbie, they were all saying this movie is absolutely a feminist film. So, the reason why this movie has a clearly incoherent message is because feminism has a clearly incoherent message. The movie is reflecting feminism. That's why it's incoherent, because feminism is incoherent. And by the end of the movie, Barbie looks like a villain. This is, I won't get into the reasons why because I don't want to spoil the movie for you guys. But by the end of the movie, Barbie seems to be the villain. And the reason for that, now, before I get to that, people say because she is the villain of the movie, in a sense, that's why it's a critique against feminism. But no, the reason why Barbie unintentionally looks like the villain is because feminism is a villainous ideology. So they can't escape that, right? If you are a feminist and you're trying to tell a feminist story, you will unintentionally criticize your ideology because feminism as a whole is criticizing what they think is the patriarchy, but it's really feminism. You know, the movie's tagline is if you love Barbie, this movie is for you. If you hate Barbie, this movie is for you. That's the tagline. If you love Barbie, this movie is for you. If you hate Barbie, this movie is for you. You see, the movie doesn't know what Barbie is supposed to be because the movie doesn't know what women are supposed to be. Feminists don't know what a woman is. That's why they don't know what Barbie is either. After all, as I said earlier, there is a Ken who identifies as Barbie in this film. The movie is incoherent because feminism is incoherent. The movie tries to portray Ken as a villain, but he comes out looking like the hero. But that's because the so called patriarchy is necessary, right? That what feminists are criticizing as villainous is actually helpful for society, in that men need to be the leaders. You can't have a healthy society unless you have healthy men leading society. So the patriarchy, the so called patriarchy, isn't the problem. Men aren't the problem. Feminists are. Feminists like Barbie, as you will see in the film. You know, now with that being said, right? Again, clearly this movie is a woke feminist movie. People who say the movie is intentionally a critique against feminism, they're wrong. It's unintentionally that way. But in a sense, because it's incoherent, both sides are right. Except, again, it's because of the movie's bad writing, not because it's brilliant. With that being said, though, this might surprise you. This is where I disagree with Ben Shapiro. This movie isn't terrible, right? I hated the bad writing, the woke elements, the feminist movement. I hated all that stuff. But as I said before, I still enjoyed Black Panther despite, though it was more subtle, despite its woke elements. And in the same way, I think you might be able to enjoy this movie as well too, despite that. I think this movie isn't great by any means. It's not some classic the way people are trying to say it is. It's not a classic movie whatsoever. It is not one of the best movies of the year. It's just okay. It's not terrible and it's not terrific. It's just okay. Barbie is described as a fantasy comedy. And I think when you understand that as a fantasy comedy, look, it's fantastical, right? They do a great job of putting you in that Barbie land fantasy. They do a great job of that. It's a beautiful movie in that way. And it's also a comedy, right? It's a fantasy comedy. And as I said earlier, I laughed at several parts of the movie, primarily when it was Ken. Ken is hilarious in this movie. I really enjoyed Ryan Gosling as Ken in this movie. He's really funny in the role. Um, he has he has a lot of parts in the movie where it's you can't help but smile or laugh. But now again, I don't think the movie is a comedy class by any means. It's not a classic comedy. However, again, there are some parts of the movie that is funny. So it is, when you understand what the movie is supposed to be, I think you could watch this movie and enjoy it for what it is, right? You can enjoy it as a fantasy comedy because again, that's what it is. So um, I can't say it's a terrible movie, nor can I say it's great. And also, look, this movie isn't made for me. It's not made for someone like me. It's made for woke feminist people. It's also made for people who just want to laugh and to who want to be in a fantasy world, right, in Barbie Land. And I can see people who might disagree with some of the woke elements or who may not even notice those moments enjoying it, and that's okay. Um, you know, I would have enjoyed the movie better if it didn't alienate me with the woke garbage, right? Um, but I can't say it's unwatchable either. I don't see myself watching it again, but I don't regret watching it either. It wasn't terrible. Um, so, despite all of this woke feminist garbage in the movie, even if you're conservative, I can see yourself enjoying this movie depending on who you are. I have some friends who are very much anti-feminist who love this movie, and knowing them and their personality, I can see why, and that's okay. So, if you're not a conservative, sorry, if you are a conservative, I can see why you can watch this movie and still enjoy it. Not everyone has to be like Ben Shapiro, right? Not everyone has to be like me. This movie has some parts that I think is interesting or funny. So that's my review of Barbie. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe to the podcast and please consider supporting me at the Paralithos Foundation or Patreon. Thank you.